He thought he was about to embarrass her in front of everyone. But he had no idea he was seconds away from losing control of the entire room. The gym pulsed with energy that afternoon, metal plates clinking, sneakers squeaking against rubber floors, the scent of effort and competition hanging in the air. In the center of it all stood Jason Brooks, broad-shouldered, confident, the kind of man people naturally stepped aside for. At 40, with years of training behind him, he carried himself like he owned the space. People listened when he spoke, laughed when he joked, followed when he led. And then there was Maya Carter. She didn't fit the rhythm of the room. 5'6", slight, quiet, always in the far corner by the stretching mats. Dark curls pulled back, worn sneakers, no flashy gear, no conversation. Most people didn't even notice when she walked in. And if they did, they forgot her just as quickly. She moved through the gym like a shadow, focused, deliberate, never asking for attention. But Jason noticed her that day, not because she stood out, but because she didn't. He watched as she repeated the same controlled movements, steady, precise, almost too precise. It irritated him. In a place built on strength and presence, she carried neither. At least, that's what it looked like. A slow smirk spread across his face as he turned to the small group gathered near him. "You see that?" he said, nodding toward her. "Girl's been coming here all week and hasn't said a word." A few chuckles followed. Heads turned. For the first time, the room began to see her. But not the way she wanted. Jason stepped forward, his footsteps loud enough to draw attention, his voice even louder. "Hey," he called out, sharp, cutting through the noise. Maya paused, just slightly. Not startled, not nervous, just aware. She lifted her eyes, calm, steady, meeting his gaze without a word. And in that brief moment, something shifted, so subtle no one else caught it. Jason didn't notice either. He only saw what he expected to see. Someone small, someone quiet, someone easy. And that assumption was about to cost him everything. Jason took another step closer, the faint grin on his face, widening as he noticed more people turning their attention toward them. In a room where presence meant everything, he knew exactly how to command it. "You new here?" he asked, his tone casual but edged with something sharper, something meant to draw a reaction. Maya did not answer right away. She lowered her hands slowly, as if finishing the last motion of her routine mattered more than the question. That alone earned a few raised eyebrows from the onlookers. Most people rushed to respond when Jason spoke. She did not. When she finally looked at him again, her expression remained unchanged. Calm, measured, almost distant. "I come here to train," she said quietly. Her voice was steady, not defensive, not apologetic, just factual. A small laugh broke from someone behind Jason, and he shook his head, amused. "Yeah, I can see that," he replied, glancing briefly at the others as if inviting them into the moment. "But you ever try something real?" The word real hung in the air, loaded, intentional. A few people shifted their stance, sensing the direction this was going. Maya did not move. She simply held his gaze, her breathing even, her posture relaxed but grounded in a way that was hard to explain. Jason tilted his head slightly, studying her now with more interest than before. There was something about the way she stood that did not quite match the image he had already decided she was. It bothered him, though he could not say why. "Come on," he continued, his voice louder now, drawing in even more attention. "You have been here all week, right? Let us see what you can actually do." Phones began to rise again, subtle at first, then more obvious. The circle around them widened just enough to create space, but not enough for escape. The room, once filled with noise, started to quiet down, replaced by a low hum of anticipation. Maya glanced around for the first time, taking in the faces, the curiosity, the expectation. For a brief second, it might have looked like hesitation. But then her eyes returned to Jason, steady as before. And that quiet, it did not feel like uncertainty. It felt like control. Jason mistook it for something else entirely. And that was the moment. The situation began to shift, though no one in that room realized it yet. Jason folded his arms, his confidence growing as the attention around them thickened, the kind of attention he thrived on. The faint hum of treadmills in the background seemed to fade, replaced by the subtle tension building in the circle that had formed. "What is it?" he said, tilting his head slightly, his tone carrying a mix of amusement and challenge. "You nervous?" A few quiet laughs followed, but they sounded thinner now, less certain than before. Maya did not respond to the question. Instead, she took a single step forward, just enough to close the distance between them. It was not aggressive. It was not hesitant. It was precise. Her movements carried a kind of efficiency that did not match the image people had already formed of her. Jason noticed it this time. His eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second, studying her stance more carefully. Her shoulders were relaxed, her balance centered, her feet placed with quiet intention. It was subtle, but it was not random. Something about it did not feel like a beginner. Still, pride is a powerful filter, and Jason had already decided who she was. He let out a short breath through his nose and smirked again, dismissing the thought before it could take hold. "All right," he said, raising his hand slightly as if setting the stage. "Let us keep it simple." His voice carried across the room, confident, controlled, drawing everyone deeper into the moment. Phones lifted higher. People leaned in. No one wanted to miss what they assumed would be a quick and predictable outcome. Maya remained still, her eyes steady, her breathing unchanged. If anything, the noise around her seemed to fall away entirely. In that silence she carried, there was no trace of fear, no need to prove anything, no urgency. It was as if she had already accepted something that no one else understood yet. Jason shifted his weight forward, testing the distance, watching for a reaction. Most people flinched under that kind of attention. She did not even slightly. And for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty brushed against the edges of his confidence. It was small, almost unnoticeable, but it was there. He stepped in anyway, because backing down was not an option in front of a crowd like this. The room held its breath, the air tightening, every eye locked onto the space between them. And right before anything truly happened, there was a moment, barely a second long, where everything felt perfectly still. The kind of stillness that only comes before something changes completely. Jason moved first, just as everyone expected him to, his confidence pushing him forward with the certainty of someone who had never truly been challenged in a room like this. It was not reckless, it was practiced, controlled, the kind of movement that usually made others step back without thinking. But Maya did not step back. She shifted, just a fraction, so small that half the people watching did not even register it. But the result was immediate. The space Jason thought he had closed was no longer there. His momentum carried slightly offline, and for the first time, his expression changed. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it was enough. A crease between his brows. A pause that lasted less than a second. Maya did not rush to fill that space. She did not press forward or try to prove anything. She simply adjusted again, her stance grounded, her balance untouched, her breathing still steady, as if nothing unusual was happening at all. The room reacted before Jason did. A quiet ripple moved through the crowd, confusion replacing amusement. People glanced at each other, unsure why something felt different when nothing obvious had happened yet. Jason straightened slightly, resetting his position, his jaw tightening as he tried to reclaim the moment. "Lucky move," he muttered under his breath, more to himself than to her. But his tone had shifted. The easy confidence was no longer as smooth as before. Maya's eyes remained on him, calm, unreadable, offering no reaction, no acknowledgement of his words. That silence pressed heavier than any response could have. Jason circled a step to his right, testing again, more cautious now, though he would never admit it. He extended his reach, slower this time, watching closely, waiting for a mistake. There was none. Every inch of Maya's movement seemed intentional, minimal, efficient, like she was doing only what was necessary and nothing more. It made it difficult to predict, difficult to control. The crowd leaned in further, their earlier smirks gone, replaced by something else. Curiosity, unease. The phones that had been raised to capture a quick joke were now held steady, as if no one wanted to miss whatever this was becoming. Jason took a deeper breath, the kind people take when they realize a situation is not as simple as they thought. Still, pride kept him moving forward. He had built his reputation in rooms like this. He was not about to lose it to someone he did not understand. But as he stepped in again, more carefully this time, one thing became clear to everyone watching, even if they could not explain it yet. This was no longer his moment. The room was beginning to belong to someone else entirely. Jason felt it now, even if he refused to fully admit it. The room had changed, and it was no longer reacting to him the way it used to. The subtle shift in energy was impossible to ignore. People were no longer watching him to be entertained. They were watching her. Maya stood exactly where she had been, her posture unchanged, her breathing slow and steady as if the tension surrounding them did not exist. But inside that stillness, there was something else now. Something undeniable. Jason exhaled slowly, trying to reset his focus, trying to push away the unfamiliar feeling creeping into his chest. He rolled his shoulders slightly, attempting to bring back the confidence that had carried him through countless situations like this. "You are quick," he said, his tone more measured this time, less mocking, though he tried to hide it. But that is not enough. The words sounded strong, but they did not land the same way anymore. Maya did not respond. She did not need to. Her silence was no longer passive. It felt deliberate, like a choice. Jason stepped forward again, more controlled now, his movements careful, calculated. He was no longer trying to impress the crowd. He was trying to understand what stood in front of him. As he adjusted his position, Maya mirrored just enough to maintain distance, never overreacting, never giving him anything extra. It was like trying to read a pattern that refused to repeat. A faint murmur passed through the crowd as people began to notice the same thing. She was not reacting. She was anticipating. Jason's jaw tightened. He extended his reach again, slower, more precise, watching closely for any sign of hesitation. There was none. Instead, Maya shifted once more, her movement almost effortless, redirecting the space between them without force, without strain. It was clean, efficient, controlled in a way that did not match her appearance at all. The realization hit him in pieces. Not all at once, but enough to unsettle him. This was not luck. This was not instinct. This was experience. Real experience. The kind that could not be faked. Around them, the room had gone nearly silent. Even the background noise of the gym seemed distant now, like it belonged somewhere else entirely. Phones were still raised, but no one spoke. No one laughed. The moment had stretched beyond entertainment into something else entirely. Jason took a step back, just one, almost unnoticeable, but it was there. And in that small retreat, the truth began to surface, even if he had not said it out loud yet. He was no longer in control, and for the first time in a very long time, he did not know what would happen next. The moment stretched longer than anyone expected, like time itself had slowed to watch what would happen next. Jason stood there, just a few feet away from Maya, but the distance between them now felt different, heavier, harder to close. He adjusted his stance again, more cautious than before, his movements no longer driven by confidence alone, but by calculation. He was searching, trying to find something familiar, something he could control. But Maya gave him nothing. She did not rush. She did not press forward. She simply waited, her presence steady, grounded, as if she had already seen this moment play out before. The silence in the room deepened, wrapping around everyone watching. Even those who had been recording began to lower their phones slightly, not because they lost interest, but because they were trying to understand. Jason took a slow breath, then stepped in once more, this time with clear intention, testing her response with more care than ever before. But again, it happened. Not a dramatic reaction, not a sudden move, just a shift, a precise adjustment that redirected everything he tried to do without force, without strain. It was subtle, almost invisible, but the effect was undeniable. Jason stopped, completely. For a brief second, he just stood there, looking at her, really looking at her for the first time. Not as a joke, not as a target, but as something he did not understand. Around them, the room had gone completely still. No laughter, no whispers, just quiet observation. Maya's eyes remained calm, focused, never leaving his. There was no pride in them, no need to prove anything. Only control. The kind of control that comes from knowing exactly what you are capable of. Jason swallowed slightly, his confidence no longer effortless, his expression no longer relaxed. He straightened his posture, but this time it was not to impress anyone. It was to regain balance, to regain something he felt slipping away. But the truth had already settled into the space between them. The control he thought he had was never his. And as he stood there, realizing it piece by piece, one thing became clear to everyone watching. The quiet girl in the corner was not reacting to the moment. She was guiding it. And Jason had just stepped into something far beyond what he thought he was starting. Jason did not move right away, and that hesitation alone said more than anything he could have spoken. The man who had controlled every moment before now stood still, measuring, recalculating, trying to reclaim something that had quietly slipped out of his hands. His eyes stayed locked on Maya, but this time there was no mockery in them, no easy confidence. Only focus. Careful, deliberate focus. He stepped forward again, slower than before, every movement controlled, as if he understood now that rushing would only make things worse. The room leaned in without realizing it, drawn into the tension that no longer needed noise to exist. Maya remained exactly where she was, her posture unchanged, her breathing steady, her presence calm in a way that did not belong to someone inexperienced. And then it happened again, but clearer this time. Jason moved, attempting to close the gap with precision, but Maya adjusted just enough to redirect him, not resisting, not forcing, simply guiding the space in a way that made his effort dissolve before it could take shape. It was not dramatic. It was not loud, but it was undeniable. Jason stopped mid-motion, his balance slightly off, not from impact, but from miscalculation. A quiet ripple moved through the crowd, sharper this time, more aware. People were no longer confused. They were starting to understand. Maya did not take advantage of the moment. She did not step forward or escalate. She simply held her position, allowing the reality of what just happened to settle into the room. That choice made it even clearer. This was not about reacting. This was about control. Jason straightened slowly, his expression tightening as the realization became impossible to ignore. He had not been testing her. He had been walking into something he did not see. And now he was already inside it. The silence grew heavier, pressing in from every side, until even the smallest movement felt amplified. Maya's eyes remained steady, calm, unwavering. There was no challenge in them. No need to prove anything. Only quiet certainty. And in that moment, Jason finally understood something he should have recognized from the beginning. He was not facing someone who needed to show strength. He was facing someone who had already mastered it. And the room, once filled with his presence, now belonged entirely to her. Jason stood there longer than he ever had in front of anyone, and that stillness spoke louder than any reaction. The man who had once filled the room with noise and control now seemed smaller, not in size, but in certainty. He shifted his weight again, but this time it was not to advance. It was to stabilize, to ground himself in a moment that no longer made sense to him. Around them, the room had gone completely silent. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, but the kind that holds attention so tightly that even breathing feels too loud. Maya remained exactly where she was, her posture relaxed, her eyes steady, her presence unchanged. She had not chased the moment. She had not escalated it. And that made everything clearer. Jason glanced briefly at the people around them, the same people who had laughed moments ago. Their expressions had changed. There was no amusement now, only quiet observation, and something else he recognized immediately. Respect. Not for him, for her. He looked back at Maya, and for the first time, there was no attempt to challenge her in his expression, only acknowledgement. He took a slow breath, then gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, but real. It was not defeat. It was understanding. Maya held his gaze for a second longer, then lowered her eyes slightly, not as submission, but as closure. The moment had ended. Without words. Without force. Just clarity. She stepped back, the same quiet step she had taken at the beginning, and reached for her bag resting near the edge of the mat. The sound of fabric shifting against the floor seemed louder than anything else in the room. No one moved. No one spoke. Jason remained where he was, watching, not with frustration, but with a kind of quiet realization settling in. Maya slipped her strap over her shoulder, her movements simple, unhurried, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. And that was the final shift. She did not stay to claim the moment. She did not look for validation. She did not need it. As she turned and began to walk toward the exit, the crowd instinctively parted, creating space without being asked. Not out of fear, out of recognition. And as the door opened and closed behind her, the room remained still for a few seconds longer, as if everyone needed time to process what they had just witnessed. Jason exhaled slowly, his eyes lingering on the now empty doorway. Because in that quiet exit, one truth had settled into the room completely. The person they had ignored had been the one in control all along. The door had already closed, but the feeling she left behind stayed in the room, heavy and undeniable. For a long moment, no one moved. The weights, the machines, even the music seemed distant, like the entire gym had paused to catch up with what had just happened. Jason remained in place, his eyes still fixed on the exit, his posture no longer commanding, but reflective. He rolled his shoulders slowly, not out of habit this time, but as if trying to reset something deeper. Around him, people began to shift, quietly at first, exchanging glances that said more than words ever could. The laughter from earlier felt distant now, almost embarrassing in hindsight. Someone lowered their phone completely. Another looked down at the floor, as if avoiding the realization settling in. Jason finally exhaled, a long breath that carried something unfamiliar with it. Not frustration, not anger, something closer to respect. He glanced at the space where Maya had been standing, replaying the moment in his mind, not as a challenge, but as a lesson he had not expected to receive. He had seen strength his entire life, measured it, competed with it, built his identity around it. But what he had just witnessed did not fit into any of those categories. It was something quieter, something deeper, something that did not need recognition to exist. A few people slowly returned to their routines, but the energy had changed. Conversations were softer, movements more thoughtful. The room no longer felt like a place where presence was forced or proven. It felt like a place where something had been revealed. Jason stepped back toward the center, then stopped, as if realizing that the space no longer belonged to him in the same way. Not because it had been taken, but because his understanding of it had changed. He gave a small nod to himself, almost imperceptible, then turned away, not defeated, but different. And somewhere beyond those walls, Maya walked on without looking back, her pace steady, her presence unchanged, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened at all. Because for her, it had not. The world had simply caught a brief glimpse of something it usually overlooked. And in that moment, without a single word spoken, the room had learned something it would not forget. True strength does not demand attention. It reveals itself when the moment calls for it. And that day, everyone finally understood what that really looks like.